Now with that intake, the top of that intake removed, we can just get rid of this gasket as well. This was the one clip that we needed to take off to get that top one off. But we also have this bracket now here. There's a couple of bolts on each side. I feel like they're 10 mil. Let's double check. Let's just move some of this wiring out of the way. Finding it a little bit difficult to get to those bolts, so I'm going to undo this one here, which is a support for the power steering lines. It's just this nut in the top here. Now I can move that aside. Now I should be able to get to this second bolt here. There's the second bolt. Now, I think I've misspoke. Now that I've pulled it apart, I can see what's actually going on. So this bracket here, once it's on there, that's the first bolt there that I removed. Under here is a bolt that holds this support bar that goes down to the bottom of the block. So it's one bolt there, one nut there to remove this power steering bracket. Then one bolt there that supports this engine brace there. Just going to run that back in. Okay, so just when I'm moving this wiring back down here, from what I can see, that wiring is attached to that bracket there, so that should all stay there when the head comes off. Now because I've misplaced my tool, we're doing something a little bit different, which is going to take the whole fuel rail out. So a couple of 12 mil bolts. First one, sit that in there for a moment. Now the reason I sat that in there is that there's a little spacer that sits just underneath there and I didn't want to lose it. But it will definitely come out when we pull these injectors out. So I'll just leave the bolt there, put in a thread or two, just going to wiggle and lift up so we can pop these injectors out. They're a little stubborn, so we'll just use a pry bar. That's that. And I can pull that out and I'll carefully grab that little insulating washer. It's a fairly important washer, so it sits between the intake and the rail, then the bolt goes in after. Just remember that when we put it back together. Just another view of it, so it sits like that. Run those bolts back in. And I'm also noting here that one of the injector rubbers or seals stayed in the manifold, so we'll probably replace these anyway. So now we can just grab that whole injector rail with it still connected and put it up over here somewhere. I didn't do this before and it kind of worried me. I've left the battery in here just disconnected. But now they've got a fuel rail pretty well sitting on my battery with open terminals. I think the safest thing to do is just to take this battery out of here. Undo the bolts for the hanger. Grab this thing and take it out. Now I feel like I can just sit that fuel rail there without it concerning of it arcing across a battery terminal and burning my workshop down, which is not how I want today to end. Okay, now this bottom half of the intake manifold, look, if I was doing this off camera, I'd probably just leave it on. I'm going to take it off in this instance just because it's a bit easier for you to see everything that's going on, and it just means I'm doing a thorough job. So the intake manifold does have a tightening sequence when you tighten it to the head. So the sequence looks something like that for the 5 bolts. Because we're undoing it, we're going to go in reverse. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's give it a whirl. So number 5's in here. There are 12. They are 12 mil. Don't know yet. That's a nut by the feel of it. It says 5. Number 4's on this side. Get that out of the way. It's 4, 3. Head down in there. Let's get that pipe out of the way. 3's just there. Number 3's down in here, and I couldn't do it with a ratchet, so let's see if we can get it with a spanner. And it's choosing to be a little bit difficult, so let's try and come in from this angle. It's enough to get it moving anyway, so that was number 3. 2's the one that's in here. Can't get it from that way. And because they are fairly tight, you're just going to want a good socket on there. That's it. Show you what I used. I just did drop the socket, but it was just a deep socket, little flexi joint that just gives it a little bit of movement and an extension bar. The last one we need to do is this number 1 that's in the middle. Okay, so that's them all cracked loose. Hopefully now I can just get them all with my fingers. So it was a bolt in the middle, nut on the outside, nut on that outside. Now, a good time to reassess this bracket to make sure that we do have all of the bolts, because it still feels like it's secured in place with something. I haven't done one of these for a while, so bear with me. Yep, and I can feel another little 10 mil socket behind there. So I have heard that people complain about these brackets that are on here, and I can kind of start to see why now. It's another little 10 mil bolt coming out. Doesn't feel loose yet, this whole manifold. Now essentially it is bolted to the block down there, and what I'm hoping is that, and there we go, so I've got a little bit of movement. I'm just going to push on that pretty hard and just bend that bracket a little bit, rather than trying to undo the bolt where it bolts onto the block. It's really hard to get to. Now I don't want to bend this too far, but I'm just going to give it a bit of just a little bit of a push. Just get it out of my way. Just need it enough so I can slide these off these bolts. You could take these studs off. Maybe I should do that. I think it's just 2 studs. Okay, so I'm going to use an E8 Torx bit just to undo the studs, and then I can just slide this manifold straight up and not be too stressed about bending that bracket too much more. stud number 1. Stud number 2, and you can see the Torx fitting on the end. So with those 2 studs out now, we should just be able to pull this intake manifold out. Just make sure there's no more clips holding it in place. Hopefully we're lucky. We can just pull it up. So that hose is disconnected there. Still got a little bit of wiring, so let's undo that plug. Plug comes off. And there's another vacuum hose here. And we should be able to pull that out. So just so you can see what we did there, plug there was that vacuum hose that just literally goes back to that one, but it kind of did a loop through something. A couple of those brackets there. We've pulled that completely out of the way. Looks pretty gungy in there too.